Every time let me ask Pastor Samuel, I think you need to choose between your so-called pastor or your marriage, Justice shouted in an angry voice. Hi Resty, welcome to Informal African Tales. Let's dive into this interesting story. In the middle of those vast and restless arguments, the city stood a modest church stuck between a pharmacy and a tailor shop on Garissa Street. Each building was a modest bungalow and beautiful with a big cross at the top of the roof. Its rusted iron gate squeezed whenever open. The church was called House of Grace Revival Chapel, though most people in the neighborhood simply called it Pastor Samuel's Church. Every Saturday morning, before the first bell rang at the nearby cathedral, and before most people opened their shop, one woman could always be found there. Her name was Livia, tall, beautiful with a fair light skin and a braided hair. At 35 years old, Livia had never married. She lived alone in a small rented apartment on the third floor of a Victory building near Willow Avenue. Her room was neat, almost ultra. A narrow bed, a window wardrobe, a table stocked with devotional books and framed scriptures hanging on cream-colored walls. Her life was quiet, disciplined and devoted, and all of it revolved around one man, Pastor Samuel Bain. Livia loved her pastor with a loyalty that bordered on reverence. To her, Pastor Samuel was more than a spiritual guide. He was counselor, protector, father figure, and final authority in all matters of life. When Pastor Samuel preached, she wrote down every word. When he requested volunteer, she was the first to rise. When he needed errand run, account balanced, flowers arranged, floors scrubbed, chairs stocked, Livia never hesitated. Each Saturday, she arrived at the church at exactly 7 o'clock in the morning, carrying a blue plastic bucket, disinfected soap, and folded cleaning clothes. She swept every corner of the sanctuary. She polished the wooden pearls until they gleamed under the stained glass light. She dusted the pulpit where Pastor Samuel preached, and every time she finished, she knelt in front row and whispered the same prayer. Lord, let your will be done on my life. Yet under her devotion lay an ache she rarely confessed about. She longed for marriage, a God-fearing man. Not because society mocked her singleness, though many did. Not because family member whispers at wedding, Livia is getting older. But because deep inside she dreamed of companionship. She dreamt of laughter in a shared home, of children's footsteps, of being chosen. Still, whenever sadness creeps in, Pastor Samuel would say gently, "Have faith, my daughter. God's timing is perfect." And she believed him, because Livia had built her entire life on trust. It happened on a humid Thursday evening in late August. The rainy season has begun to retreat, leaving behind heavy clouds and a heart of burden towards marriage, streaked with gold from the setting sun. Livia had attended a church movie service, a screening of a Christian film about patience and divine timing. Pastor Samuel himself had recommended it. As she walked home along Makodo Street, clutching her handbag close against the evening breeze, she paused at a traffic crossing near the old Fountain Square. That was where she met him. A tall man in a charcoal suit stepped beside her. He carried himself with easy confidence, his polished shoe reflecting the amber street lights. His face was striking strong jawline, warm brown eyes, and a smile that seemed both practical and sincere. "Excuse me," he said. Livia turned. "Yes, how may I help you?" "I hope this doesn't sound strange," he said, smiling. "But I saw you from across the street, and I felt compelled to speak to you." Livia blinked in surprise. "My name is Johnson Reed." He extended his hand. She hesitated, then shook it. His grip was warm and firm. "I am Livia." He looked delighted. "A beautiful name." She lowered her eyes shyly. Johnson continued. "I own the Reed Textile in Kingston Market. I sell imported fabrics." Livia knew the place. Rick Textiles was one of the largest fabric businesses in the city. Johnson was wealthy. That much was obvious. But there was no arrogance in his voice, only directness. Then, after only a few minutes of conversation, he said words that left her breathless. I know this may seem sudden, but I would like to cut with you seriously, beautiful lady. I am looking for a wife, not a passing acquaintance. Livia's heart pounded. No man has ever spoken to her in this way. She clapped her hands together nervously and replied, I must tell my pastor first. Johnson stared at her in surprise. Your pastor? Yes, she said earnestly. Anything important in my life must first go through him. He looked at her in surprise again. Then Johnson nodded politely. Very well, no problem. And before he could say another word, Livia turned and hurried towards church. Pastor Samuel was in his office when she arrived. The church building was dim and quiet, except for the hum of the ceiling fan above his desk. He looked up as she burst in breathlessly. Daddy, she exclaimed. Pastor Samuel removed his glasses calmly. I met a man, his expression sharpened. A man? Yes, his name is Johnson Reed. He wants to marry me. Pastor Samuel leaned back in his chair and folded his hand. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, do you mean the popular Reed? Yes, Daddy, she said. Some of those men are ritualists. We must pray and fast. Livia nodded eagerly. Yes, Daddy. For 7 days, he said, no decision until heaven confirms it. And so began a week of fasting. Livia obeyed without question. Each day she drank only water until sunset. Each night she knelt beside her bed praying for divine approval. At the end of 7 days, Pastor Samuel said, bring Johnson to me. Johnson arrived at the church the following Tuesday, wearing a navy blue suit. When he entered Pastor Samuel's office, he respectfully knelt. Pastor Samuel watched him carefully. What are your intentions towards my daughter, Livia? Johnson answered plainly, I love her. What are your intentions towards my daughter, Livia? Johnson answered plainly, I love her. I want her to be my wife. Pastor Samuel asked many questions about finances, family background, faith, business dealings, future plans. Johnson answered each one patiently. Then Pastor Samuel dismissed him. For 2 months, he gave no answer. 2 long months. Livia waited in anxious silence. Finally, on a cool October afternoon, Pastor Samuel called her into his office and smiled. My daughter, you may go ahead. Livia wept with joy. At last, her miracle had come. Their wedding took place in December. Cool breeze swept through Macaulay, carrying dried leaves along the church courtyard. The sanctuary was decorated with ivory roses and candle lantern. Livia wore satin white. Johnson looked radiant in black formal wear. The congregation cheered as they exchanged vows. Pastor Samuel officiated, his hands raised in blessing. To love, honor, and cherish. When Johnson kissed his bride, applause thundered through the chapel. For the first time in her life, Livia belonged to someone, and she believed happiness had finally begun. She was wrong. At first, Johnson ignored it, the phone calls, the constant consultation. Whenever Johnson asked, what should we eat tonight? Livia answered, let me call my pastor first, so that he will tell us what to eat tonight. What will we eat that is filled with the Holy Spirit? When Johnson suggested repainting the dining room, I should ask Pastor Samuel first, she said again, so that he will tell us the paints that will suit the dining room. If they argue over small things, curtains, bills, travel plans, she phoned Pastor Samuel immediately. Even intimate marital disagreements became church matters. Johnson grew increasingly disturbed. One evening, after she called Pastor Samuel to ask whether she could cook rice or potatoes for dinner, Johnson lost patience. He slammed his hand against the table. Enough! Livia froze. Johnson's voice trembled with frustration. You must explain something to me. Are you married to this pastor or to me? The question hit her like thunder. She stared at him speechless. Johnson continued, I respected your faith before marriage. I respected your church, but I cannot build a marriage with a wife who cannot make one decision without another man's permission. Livia burst into tears. You don't understand. Pastor guides me. No, Johnson said quietly. He controls you. That night, Livia could not sleep. Rain tapped against the bedroom window. Johnson slept facing away from her. His silence hurt more than anger. For the first time, she questioned herself. Had she surrendered too much? Had she mistaken dependence for faith? The next morning, she went to the church and told Pastor Samuel everything. Instead of compassion, his face hardened. Your husband is challenging spiritual authority, he said. You must stand firm and not let him discourage you towards your faith. But he is my husband, she whispered. Pastor Samuel's tone sharpened. And I am your shepherd. Those words unsettled her. For the first time in 15 years, Pastor Samuel's voice no longer sounded like comfort. It sounded like possession. Johnson loved Livia deeply, but he was exhausted. He had married a woman, not an extension of another man's authority. One evening, he sat beside her on the veranda. The city light flickered below like fallen stars. Livia, he said gently, I never wanted to separate you from your faith, but marriage requires two people to build trust together. She said nothing. He took her hand. I need you with me, not always somewhere else emotionally. A tear rolled down her cheek. For the first time, she saw the loneliness in her husband's eyes, and it broke her heart. Weeks later, Pastor Samuel called her late at night, demanding she come to church immediately to settle a trivial committee dispute. Johnson stopped her at the door. No, she looked shocked. He cannot summon my wife like a servant. Livia stood trembling between two words. Then slowly, she removed her hand from the doorknob and stayed. That night marked the turning point. She did not go, and for the first time she chose her marriage first. The next Sunday, Livia met Pastor Samuel privately. With shaking hands but steady eyes, she said, Pastor, I am grateful for all your guidance, but I am not a wife. I must learn to make decisions with my husband. Pastor Samuel's face darkened. You are making a very big mistake. No, she said softly. For the first time, I am making my own choice. She left the office trembling but free. Healing was slow. Marriage counseling helped. Honest conversation helped more. Livia learned to cook without permission, to choose curtains without approval, to disagree with Johnson and resolve it privately. Their home gradually became theirs, not Pastor Samuel's extension. Months later, laughter returned, trust returned, and in spring, new life arrived. Livia discovered she was pregnant. When she told Johnson, he lifted her into his arms and wept. Their daughter was born in April. They named her Grace Abigail Reed. As Livia held her child under the soft hospital light, she understood something profound. Faith should guide, not imprison. Love should unite, not divide. And no human voice should ever replace one's conscience. Johnson kissed her forehead, and she replied, Thank you for helping me find myself. He smiled. No, he said, you found yourself when you chose to speak. Outside, spring rain washed the city clean. And for the first time in many years, Livia's future belonged not to fear, not control, but love freely chosen. Thank you very much for watching Informal African Talks. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more interesting stories.